Okay, good afternoon everyone, and to everyone online again. So this is a talk which was prepared by two members of our engineering team over at University College Dublin, but unfortunately neither Ciaran nor Atia are able to give this presentation either in person or online. I'm going to have to do it. A word of warning, I'm not an engineer, so if anything I say sounds naive or just wrong, then that is the reason. You've seen this slide before, and so this is the background to this work on the topology tiles. And you've just heard from Pip how during phase 1 of Ecostructure we produced these very small experimental units, 25 by 25 centimeters, which mimicked the topology of those regions of natural shore where we found either high biodiversity or a lot of species that we were interested in, either because of air or because of good all. Now I'm having to peer over to see the in-person audience. Okay, the next phase in phase 2 of Ecostructure, the obvious next thing to do was to scale up these designs to a scale where they would be commercially viable, and so in order to do that, we employed engaged with engineering companies to produce formliners which would enable much larger experimental units to be produced, and indeed units which could then potentially be used on a commercial scale. And we took two different types of approaches to producing large wall panels and producing habitat blocks. And it's the wall panels which I'm going to focus on in this talk. And what Ciaran and Atia wanted to focus on in this talk was the engineering challenges to upscaling these small designs. And it turns out that producing something 25 by 25 centimeters is a lot easier than producing something that's larger. And so we're just going to take you briefly through some of the challenges that they identified in upscaling this work, and some of the solutions or some of the considerations which needed to be taken in order to actually resolve these issues. So the specific challenges included, first of all, the orientation of the surfaces, but then there were problems also with, or certainly challenges also with the production, so the process of actually producing the large panels, and the economic considerations, the costs involved in upscaling these panels. And then finally, there were issues as well with conducting engineering assessments of the host structure, so the structure onto which the panels were bolted or incorporated after the panels had been fitted. And this was particularly the case in structures in which the panels had been retrofitted rather than incorporated into the design. The concrete panels are routinely made in the precast sector. There's nothing unusual about this. So panels of the size that we were considering for our topography panels. And all of these panels require some kind of reinforcement. So in the case of small panels, they can be meshed, but the larger panels require some pre-stressing. And this reinforcement is absolutely critical in order for the panels to be safe and to requirements. The typical cover of concrete on one of these panels is 50 millimeters on each side, and this means that the minimum thickness is usually about 120 millimeters. The issue with the topography tiles is that the best topography tiles typically include crevices and grooves and depressions, and this means that they're very variable in thickness. So in order to meet the engineering requirements, you have to have a minimum thickness of about 120 millimeters. So it means that at the thickest part of the panels, they're a lot thicker than that. And so that obviously creates an increase in material usage and an increase, therefore, in weight and in the cost of producing. It means that the panels with the really deep grooves, which are often the ones which showed the highest biodiversity, also tend to be more expensive ones. The form liners are essential for providing the topography, and these are produced in 3D printed templates using silicone rubber. The good thing about form liners is that they can be reused multiple times. So you can use one form liner to create 100 or more panels, depending upon the roughness of the panels. But the downside of the form liners is that individually they're very expensive to produce. So the deeper topography and the cost of them depends on the amount of silicone rubber used. So the deeper the topography, the deeper the grooves, the more silicone rubber you need for the form liner, and the more expensive they're going to be to produce. And what this means is that for a small trial where you're only producing a few panels, the cost of producing the form liner is a major part of the total cost of producing the tiles. So, but thinking forward, if you were producing a lot of tiles, if you producing hundreds of tiles, then the cost, the proportion of the cost which is involved in producing the form liner would obviously be a lot lower. So if you were only producing 10 panels and your form liner cost €6,000, then the overall cost per panel would be €300 per panel. Whereas if you were producing 100 panels and your form liner cost an equivalent amount, then the cost per panel would obviously be a lot lower, because you can reuse the same over 100 times. The final challenge was with regard to engineering assessment. So this isn't so much a problem if the topography surface is actually designed into the original structure, but if you're retrofitting these larger panels to an existing structure, that structure still needs to be accessible to engineers to perform engineering assessment. So if, for example, we were fitting panels to this bridge abutment, the engineers would still need to be able to get to the bridge in order to assess its structural integrity. And a visual assessment of this is important. So if you're hiding large proportions of the structure by covering them in these concrete panels, then this can be an issue. You can use concrete coring through the panel to allow a certain amount of surface testing, but there are questions over whether this is sufficient. So really, the topography panel, so from an engineering point of view, incorporating topography profiles into new constructions would be preferable, but obviously we have a lot of existing structures where retrofitting them would be a more practical option. And but we do also have the issue, and this creates the challenges we've just been talking about. But we do also have the option where there are new structures being designed of incorporating these topographic surfaces, and also of producing standalone elements such as the large blocks which are being used as habitat in the experiments which are about to go ahead in Dublin Port. So both the panel, we're now in the process of producing both the panels and the standalone blocks, and we're hoping to deploy these in Dublin Port very, very soon. So, and a very big thank you to our collaborators at Dublin Port who have enabled us